Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whenever you happen to answer to this bomb riff dialogue with my colleague, my friend, my better half,
Buddy of your buddy.
not your buddy, my buddy, Roseanne Rabiola Mile. And it is Tuesday evening, August 20th, 2025, sorry, at
Is it
approximately,
Tuesday or Wednesday? I think it's Wednesday.
did I say Tuesday?
Yeah, I think so. That's okay.
Okay, so it's Wednesday. You're absolutely right. It's Wednesday, August 20th, 2025 at 6:30 p.m. my time and 5:30 your time. So I just hit you up on a quick a quick record because things are moving fast and furious and I'm getting more and more. I don't know, there's just this something. If I were to represent it, in a movie or film with some sort of special effect, it'd be the churning of energy. It'd be this composite thing coming together. It would be this explosive, just bang of everything that we have been driving forward for the last, several years. But with increasing frequency and I'd say more legitimacy, even though it was legitimate the whole time, but just more and more pieces of the puzzle are coming together. And, I guess the intent of when you and I record is to try to just make it brief, share what we're thinking about, reiterate what the Clean New Deal is for those who are watching this, and hopefully it spreads like wildfire, like I had just described. So if you're watching this and you become compelled, you become inspired, you become enlightened, please like, subscribe, and share. And please, as quickly as possible, become a nuclear reaction vector of truth yourself because it's more and more just completely clear just the monstrosity of lies on a daily basis. So let me kind of tee it up this way in terms of some of the things that I've seen today. Um, Starting with one of the front page article that I had read about Donald Trump turning his attention to a Fed Reserve governor who he is accusing of mortgage fraud.
Right.
Yeah,
Is the pot calling the kettle black?
that's right. That's right. And this on top of his beef with Fed Reserve Chairman who's in Jackson Hole right now, and the Fed apparently doesn't know how to read the data. This on top of like 2 weeks ago, where we had Trump fire the person in charge of labor statistics or the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and so really, we were coming at this with our own cynicism, jaded understanding of how things have worked at the Fed for some time, which undergirds everything that we're about. But this is even more ridiculous in a sense, but especially just the lie denies, the switch the blame implicate the projection that many people have tuned into in terms of what Donald Trump is. And I want to give you a chance to respond, but let me just tee this up for you this way, right? So we learned in recent truth bomb dialogues with the new untouchables, but particularly a gentleman by the name of David K. Johnston, who has really outlined Donald Trump's 4 decades long of, racketeering, corruption, criminality, all sorts of different things. And I've plugged that into information that I've known, particularly as it relates to Deutsche Bank. And that connects to Putin. And of course, last Friday and then through Saturday, we saw this crazy meeting with Putin and all of the aftermath of things that are going on, particularly as it relates to
Roll
Ukraine.
out the red carpet. Yeah.
Yeah, and but he was in the beast, right? Putin was in the beast. I mean, this stuff is just incredible, particularly when you know that Putin and Trump are literally just the face of 3 decades of global criminality.
Yeah.
That intersects with what we just laid out, that Trump is now accusing a Fed governor and also Adam Schiff, the California senator, of mortgage fraud, where Trump was one of the kingpins of mortgage fraud. Now, ironically, a lot of people out there in the netherworlds here on online and on Blue Sky and wherever else, and you see this happen from time to time where people are like, oh my God, Letitia James, the Attorney General of the state of New York, is in the crosshairs, and because she had got a successful, um, you know, uh, uh, case rendered against Trump for the fraud, particularly the appraisal fraud, as it related to creating a case that would lead to basically the death knell of the Trump corporation in New York City because of all of these dimensions of what constitute what we know is control fraud. But Letitia James never took it to the fact that he was being financed for Deutsche Bank for a specific reason. And oh, yeah, Deutsche Bank has been connected to Putin the whole time. I mean, this stuff is so freaking obvious. And this on top of other things that were coming down the pike, like more and more questions regarding Epstein, more and more questions about where'd the money come from? Why was the money engaged? Who was behind it? And you look at this and you understand the semantics of just that part. And I'm not talking about the honey trap part and the underage girls and the disgusting, disparaging scenario that people are, responding to, which is what? There's two levels of law. Oh my God, the elites can do whatever they want. They can get their rocks off by sleeping with children, these old, disgusting men, and they're involved with what exactly? I mean, it's like everybody goes to a certain level and then it stops. But what we're revealing is no, it doesn't end there. That's just the beginning. Because, oh, by the way, from Putin and Deutsche Bank, there were billions of dollars laundered through none other than liquid capital. Liquid capital being Epstein's freaking program at Bear Stearns that was bailed out by what was then the phase one of Maiden Lane, which would then become what we're posting and you've been posting and you've used these thumbnails that are brilliant. Federal Reserve Act 13.3. And we'll get into what that's all about and everything else. But I think I'm going to pause there and give you a chance to react because is it not just absolutely insane that we're holding the light of liberty and truth in this insanity of darkness? And that's what it is. It's the nature of pedophilia. It's the nature of deception and racketeering and criminality and war and all of the other things that go with it. I mean, we're talking about, if we were using analogies, this is on a biblical scale, and I could go on and on and on. But please respond to what it is that I'm riffing about.
And I had a great example of meeting with maybe there were like a dozen boomers. Well, I'm a boomer. I don't look like it, but I go to a senior place today. Over the years, I have done uh, big dinners for the community of Boulder City because I never want people to be alone, especially on a holiday. I think of every day as a holiday. For me, the Monday after Christmas, the Tuesday after, any day of the week to me is a holiday. It's a day for everyone to have enough food and enough nourishment to be able to carry on for the rest of the day.
Very cool.
At least the day. At least the day. I can't I can't teach a classroom full of any kind of individuals if they're hungry, if they're sleepy, if they're sick. I can't, I can give them, I can give them the food. I have to give them the food and the water and the ice or the hot soup in the winter. I have to give them those elements before I can share the facts. Social media is a different animal, okay? On social media, you share the facts. I can't share them. I can't give them the hot meal, but be that as it may. So I go and I'm in front of a group of boomers and I'm asking them, and they had been prepped by the executive director. They had been prepped to say, these people are coming to talk to you because they want to have the community Christmas dinner at our location because the location we were doing it at only seats about 60 to 80 people at a time, and this location seats 180 people at a time. It's got a big kitchen, it's got a steam table, it's got all the stuff I need. Okay. I'm standing up there. I'm answering before they even ask the questions, because I've gone through this before. I'm answering all their questions. Health cards, this, that. The details don't matter. But I'm answering all their questions before they asked them. And what did they do? They weren't listening. That was number one. Because they asked me questions about what I had already shared with them and shared with them the 30 years of experience I've had with all kinds of community groups, with the city, with this one, with that one, in Boulder City. And there's this person standing next to me, and she says, well, I don't know you from Adam. And she said it just like that. She didn't say it jokingly or anything. I don't know you from Adam. Why should I believe you? Patrick, I had to hold myself back. I, I was ready to blow. I was ready to blow. And I stepped back and I just reiterated what I had already spent, myself and my friend Deb had already told them. They didn't listen. Okay. So they were ready to take a vote. This is for the whole community of Boulder City. No charge. And so Deb's explaining stuff, I'm explaining stuff. They were ready to take a vote when this person said, I don't know you from Adam. Okay, lady. So what happens? They put off taking a vote. We don't get an answer for another month. Okay. I walked out of there and I look at Deb and I say, well, I don't even want to have it here. I'll do extra work, whatever it is, I'll do it someplace else. Because I got other places I can do it. I wanted to say, okay, I'm not going to be like that. I know I was older than some of those people who look 20 years older than I do, sitting in that room. I know it, but I ain't gonna be like them. I'm not gonna be. They're scowling. One woman's going through the whole meeting. I'm looking
Okay,
at,
can I interrupt for a second?
yeah.
Rosanna, Dana. Look, all right. I have no idea what you're talking about. But let me just say this first and foremost. The nourishment to get people to understand seems so, again, biblical to me. It just seems like, okay, the wafer and this, that, and the other, but feast throughout time, and you can't think when you're hungry.
That's right.
You can't. Now that's
That's
first
right.
and foremost. And second of all, you reminded me of one of my favorite characters as you were just doing that, Chauncey Gardner, in Being There, which was a fabulous film. And he would say things that nobody had a clue of what he was talking about. But by the end of the film, you find out that this guy may as well be walking on water, because that's exactly what he did at the end, because everything was about a metaphor of something else. And, he was just this very elixir. So I'm going to step back and I'm going to ask you a couple of questions to see if I can try
Okay.
to understand what this has to do with fraud, corruption, the end of the world, evil,
I know.
the answers that we have, and all of the things that those in the social media apparatus aren't getting at the moment because of the nature of however you want to explain it in terms of a metaphor. I call it being overwhelmed, not fully having an orientation or understanding, but people do share memes. And you have been producing memes the last couple of days that have been extremely effective. So before I ask any more compounded parts of a question and make it complicated, let's just start with what were you talking about that has relevance to what it is that we do on a daily basis?
Okay. The fact that I had to go into this room is exactly what I see when good people with the right intentions we'll say, go into court. And they are faced with a judge and an attorney on the other side who doesn't give a damn about what they're saying, why they're in front of the judge, why they have this case. I'm going there because I want to do what is good for an entire community. Now, Mark Dan, who was the Attorney General of Ohio, has been taking on cases to go into that room. It's the same thing. Go into that room with people who they don't care what Mark has to say. They don't care. They got the power. They can do whatever they want. They can tell me yes or no. And see, I don't care if they tell me no because I can go somewhere else. Mark has to go in front of this judge. Whatever this judge says, he is stuck with, unless, of course, he can appeal it to another court. Okay. They're doing stuff. All the Trump people, all the courts all over, all the judges, they're doing everything without listening, just like all those people in front of me today. They're not listening because they've already decided they're going to do whatever they want. They got the power and they want to be the big cheese. Okay. And you know, I say that all the time. When you have people who are so entrenched, and these people are little no nothings, okay? When you have people who are so entrenched in this corrupt system, see, I look at Trump's at the top, he's the pus. He's the pus coming out. You got this massive, corroded, rotting, festering boil of all these people that little fat ass, all he ever did was imitate what they had already done. He listened to Roy Cohn. Roy says, you do this. And, Trump says, yeah, oh, jump. Yeah, how high? How high? Okay, I'm ready to do it. You see, I just connect whether it's Trump, whether it's little people, everybody wants to be the big shot. Everybody wants to be the big cheese.
Okay. Well, hold on a second. You're the big shot. Okay, you're the big shot. You want to know why you're the big shot? Because
What?
you've been in the trenches and you know the stuff inside and out, and you know exactly what's going on. But you're reacting to what I like to refer to on a normal basis is the four walls of our existence, right?
Okay.
You're reacting to a situation where you were out today and this, that, and the other, and there's people, and I'm kind of like, what, and what are you talking about, and what, but I know there's a metaphor in there somewhere, and it's just that everybody knows everything.
Yeah.
Everybody knows everything. Nobody knows anything. Nobody knows.
They don't know what they don't know.
Right, but a lot of that is because they refuse. They're entrenched. They're stuck. They're paralyzed. They've got kryptonite. They've got, and who's they? They look. You mentioned MAGA. Okay, MAGA. Let's. Who was MAGA? MAGA is a lot of different kind of splinters of a different thing that we could identify over the course of, I don't know, our lifetimes, but primarily conservative white Christians that might be folks that we would see attend mega churches and mega church rallies, right? They tend to conglomerate in their own sort of demographic. And of course, they consider themselves a lot of the times better than everybody else. They have certain sorts of standards. They like, guns. They don't want to be told what to do. They supposedly celebrate liberty, but not for anybody that's not them. They're totally against the other. Typically, people of color, typically people of different faiths. Transgenders become the thing, ever since the bathrooms and all of these other things that have been going on for a long time. But really, their modus operandi is, you know, I'd say mega church rallies. And, one of the things about Trump that I've, obviously observed throughout the beginning, but I always was a little bit reluctant to think that Trump could make the jump. He jumped the shark, so to speak, right? How does a guy who's a philanderer, who's this billionaire, who's a fraud con artist, who's screwed every labor he's ever come across, which are typically blue collar folks that seem to, I mean, a lot of them, unless they work for him, obviously, seem to be attracted kind of like flies to the light or cockroaches to the Roach Motel. But the nature of you know, Don the Con is that he's been nothing but the opposite, and he's so godless and so everything. But what I did discover he has in common is into pedophilia. He's into raping the flock, and he's into money. What are these, heads of these pastors of these mega churches? Well, we know they're into the prosperity gospel, but they may also be into that other stuff. At least that's what I think, because again, without the data and everything
There's a
else,
lot of them coming out, though. You
I
see
saw
that
I
all the
saw
time.
when Elon had purchased X, the first thing in the transition from the Jack Dorsey time, and I had plenty of issues with Jack Dorsey's ownership of Twitter, and I wasn't even that engaged in Twitter until we released the con that you can find at thecon.tv, until about 2020, even though I joined way back in 2012. But, I started to kind of learn a little bit about Twitter. And when Elon, is my point, bought Twitter, the first thing that came out was just this surge of interest in pedophilia. Or it was in the Pizzagate, of course, the Democrats are bloodsuckers that are raping children, and they detested it. Fast forward to 2025, even though all of the Epstein stuff happened really over the course of 3 decades, I think, if you look at the chronology and the timeline, Epstein gets really rolling in the 80s, 90s, pretty big. By the time you're in the early 2000s, that's coming to a head. And then, of course, he's, arrested in he was arrested in 2013 and then rearrested in 2017. And then he dies in jail in 2019, right? But everybody who's involved with Epstein, as we now see, were raping children. And that's what they were doing. And that was one of the things, of course, the Trump campaign was to reveal how the elites were doing this. And now what we can see, and they're going to move the needle because they're going to release information on the Democrats and yada, yada, yada. But behind door number 2 and door number 3 and all the way, back to door number 2000, as you start to go down the corridor, is the money, the money, the money, the money, the money, the money. And when we're going through that whole thing, Well, let me just make this comment first too, and this is another thing that was just on my radar. You mentioned Roy Cohn. Okay, so Roy Cohn, his influence on Donald Trump was that he basically introduced Donald Trump to high society. Roy Cohn was the guy that, and I don't know all of the nuances. I don't know all the timeline. I just know that Roy Cohn had a shit ton of power in Manhattan. He was able to get the guy from Queens, who was the son of Fred Koch, who made all of his billions of dollars on basically government contracts, stealing and exploiting minorities. That was their business model. And of course, what we learned from David K. Johnston was that his grandfather was a pimp, and his dad, of course, was a part of the KKK as well. So, what an amazing lineage of fraudsters and racists. Of course, in Donald Trump, we saw his entire public persona, particularly going back to the what was it called, the Central Park Five, right? And he took out a full page New York Times ad saying that they were guilty, and he really, got everybody. In fact, he said the same exact thing he just said about the Washington scenario to justify sending in the cops, or the executive branch taking over the Metropolitan Police of Washington D.C., because he was saying the same thing he said back in 1985ish, I think, with Central Park Five, that there were these runaway gangs and drugs and this and that, and they were going to bring in the heavies to be able to clean things up. That's exactly what they did 30 years ago. And meanwhile, and I've been to DC many, many times over my lifetime, the crime rate in DC has plummeted over the course of last 30 years. Not even close. But he's doing that, a lot of people are suggesting, because a distraction to all things Epstein on the eve of meeting with Putin. And Putin, it looked like from the video that Putin was pretty happy with the with the outcome, because many of us think that Putin has got all sorts of information that he can use and destroy Trump with. Hence why Trump is his, basically licks his feet every chance he gets. This is the president of the most powerful country in the world that has just completely decimated our superpower status. One guy in less than 6 months. But that's because, Roseanne, our system has been in disarray and rotting from this infestation of corruption for decades, which is what we'll review. So let me finish on this point, and then I'm going to let you rep, because I think I got it back to where we are in the Clean New Deal. But the long and the short of it is, my friend, that Roy Cohn was gay. Like Seinfeld said, not like there's anything wrong with that. But guys who hide their homosexuality, whether it's in the church while they rape children, or if they're, in government and they use it as a mask and these guys are twisted. Okay. You know who comes to mind? Who's our South Carolina senator who is obviously,
Lindsey Graham.
Yeah, Lindsey Graham. Look, sorry if I'm projecting here, but I'd be shocked if Lindsey Graham isn't a closeted homosexual and just hiding and perverted, and somebody's got information on him, and that's why he's such a toe licker. Meanwhile, back in 2016, I mean, he was like, Trump is the incarnation of Satan, right? Okay, boy, did he flip fast, right? Again, this sort of information. What about Johnson, right? The Speaker of the House, right? Is that guy not what we kind of think? I mean, there's just this weird sort of commonality between these gay Republicans that are masked, that get into power, because when you understand the club, particularly Epstein, it's like, if you want to be a part of that club, you got to play ball by their rules, which means they're going to get you leverage, which means they own you. And that's exactly from Putin on down to the whole situation has been able to do. And the banality of the evil from this is so crystal clear to me. And I think everyone can see it, particularly those who respond so horrifically by the stories of Virginia Giuffre and the women that were, basically plucked out of Eastern Europe, of which Melania seems to be one of them, by the way. And, basically pulled out of poor settings in the United States as well, and offered scholarships to college and this and that. But all they had to do was sleep with all of these old guys and leverage everybody and yada yada yada. And we know that there's probably so much more in the files behind the scenes that we'll ever see, yada yada yada, going back to the like JFK kind of assassination stuff where nobody's going to know anything. Why? Because the system of corruption has absolute control. And
Yeah.
we can now see in the United States, millions of us can see it, that the elites are above the law, that there's two sets of laws, that there's one above the line and then the law for the rest of us. And the weird thing is that most Americans don't realize that's why we have a United States to begin with, because we had a revolution against the tyranny of King George III. And then we create the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and separation of powers, of which apparently 99% of MAGA doesn't understand. But the thing that gets me about this, where we are at the moment, and why I wanted to record with you and force the light of truth into the darkness, and we've got to get to the Clean New Deal and sum this up, but I want you to respond to what I'm saying. It's all a freaking facade. It's all a tapestry of evil. It's all a symphony of lies. And it's obvious, but for evil in the shadows. And everybody knows it, but they're disoriented, like the people that you were talking about, that you went to, seniors that didn't know what they were going to vote on, and they didn't know if they could trust you, and you were just trying to give them nourishment and truth. Okay, so that's where it really works for me, that parallel, because the facts are the nourishment for the mind, and that's what we've got behind us. That's who we are. Who are we? Respond to what it is that I've laid out for you, and then take us to the next step, because I think it's just pretty crystal clear what people aren't seeing.
But I have to add one little piece. You talked about the mega churches. Well, I always, since Jerry Falwell and his wife and all that stuff, mega churches, the place where I want to have this dinner on Christmas rents the building out to yet another church in Boulder City.
Makes sense. That's why they don't want to listen to you.
Okay. And I know all these people are of the red,
MAGA.
they're of the red maggot persuasion. That's number two. But number three, as we walk in to be introduced, the new president says, "Oh, did you notice this new church?" And I know all the churches in Boulder City. The new church is meeting here in our building. They're okay with that. They're okay with that. But
What you're saying, and I think you're leaving out, is what they're not okay is that you're going to feed the homeless there.
would we feed we've always fed homeless people. Anybody who
I know,
walks
but are you going to do that for this event?
feed homeless people? Sure.
Okay, so maybe that's what they're against.
You know what? I've had events in that building before. I never turn anybody away.
Right,
I
but
go
they do in their what, their hypocrisy of Christianity, right? They're gonna turn away those that are obviously in dire need.
So what I do is I have to go to another place. I don't need to bow or capitulate to whatever conditions they want to set.
By the way, two huge law firms have been referred to be Kirkland and Ellis, which is one of the biggest, and I can't remember the name of the other. I just posted it from the New York Times. Two of the largest, let's just say, endowed in terms of their client list and who they serve and so on and so forth. They're providing free counsel to Donald Trump, talking about capitulation. Same with same with networks. The lies are everywhere. Okay, so you're trying to make another corollary that you're not going to bend the knee and you're not going to capitulate to somebody who doesn't align with your principles. Is that what I'm
That's
hearing?
right. That's absolutely right. Okay. Now, when we look at our Clean New Deal, we have this Rubik's Cube, okay? And we ask people, all right, folks, we have 4 questions we're going to ask you. What is qualified immunity? Qualified immunity refers to, and I'll put this in air quotes, law enforcement. Yeah, they're enforcing the law, my ass. They're enforcing the law against people who don't have what? They don't have power. They don't have resources. And why don't they have power and resources? Because these people over here have stolen it.
Who are these people?
These people are who I call the big boys. They are all, I love to use the term financial fraudsters, but Bill Black, who has been your mentor and continues to give us more and more information, calls them the robber barons.
Right. And what do I call them a lot? Think back in the annals because you were close to it. It was interesting. I'll save it for time. Financial terrorists.
I said financial terrorists
I don't
first.
think you said financial terrorists. I think you said financial something.
I
Anyway,
said the big boys,
big boy.
I like to call them financial terrorists. They're
You were
frauds,
close to saying that. That's why I
they're
said that. But anyway,
they're thieves.
that's what they are. They're financial terrorists. That's
They're
part and
thieves.
parcel to what we're talking about. But continue with qualified immunity
They're
because you're
thieves.
spot on.
So what happens is the cops, they go do whatever the hell they want. Shoot
What are
people.
cops? What are cops if they're not themselves accountable to the law?
If they're not accountable to the law, then they're criminals.
Or they're some version of like the militaristic arm of fascism, or maybe of the King's Guard, or they're certainly not protecting and serving. What they're doing is the
Of
law
course.
serves up to the tyranny and comes down hard on those who are vulnerable, like you said.
So they go, they shoot, they kill, they maim, they do whatever, except serving and protecting
And they're not
people.
accountable. Amen.
And they just get away with it.
That's right.
So that's got to go.
They got a
Okay.
license. They got a license to kill.
License to kill.
It's basically an insurance situation so that the cities get off and the state. It's this like legalese kind of paradigm. They might in a lot of cases, face some sort of like I don't know what, like a 6 month suspension. But unless it's got a shit ton of publicity, chances are they're not going to be in front of the cameras and actually go to trial for
Right.
actual murder.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So they
By
get
the way,
away.
is that important to consider now that we see that Trump is moving closer and closer to martial law?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it's not only important in DC and Los
LA.
Angeles, it's it's important in all the places where it's going on that the mainstream isn't talking about.
Yeah, and by the way, let's remind everybody, even though we all know it, I'll just say it out loud. But what did Trump not do on January 6th, 2020? He didn't
Didn't
activate the
do
National Guard
anything.
for a
That's
freaking
right.
for the insurrection. Okay,
He
what did the Supreme Court not do? By the way,
look, when you don't call attention, which our media hasn't been calling attention to the real root of the problem, which is why the whole Clean New Deal has been put together. Nobody's saying it. And
Right.
every,
We started with qualified immunity, and now we went to judicial immunity, right? Because what happens when the judicial immunity, what is it?
they do what they want too. And I love Michael Winston's piece that you have on film that says, well, it all depends on where the judge was, what was his pay grade,
It's where he
like,
fits in the revenue stream, is what he
yeah,
was inferring. But again, to stay with where you are on the Rubik's cube of this whole thing, you identify two things, but we're kind of halfway through the judicial immunity, right? So we talked about police officers and qualified immunity have the right, literally, the ability to kill, okay, and not be held accountable. Okay, that's perverse incentives.
yeah,
If you have cops that are out in the streets as part of a lot of people are calling ICE Gestapo wing of the party, whatever we want to think of it as, it's a militaristic arm of.
look, they know they can get away with anything.
Okay, and so should we have qualified immunity for the police? Okay, what
Yeah,
about judicial immunity? I mean, seriously though, think about this. I just said on January 6th, I used the analogy. It's so ridiculous in 2025. The Mr. Five-time bankruptcy, six-time bone spur deferment from Vietnam, who's never served a day in his life, and he called guys like Senator McCain, who spent I don't know how many years in the Hanoi Hilton,
yeah,
when he was destroyed and brutalized, fighting for the country, and he didn't take an early reprieve because he stayed for his other fallen
first
comrades.
men,
And
yeah,
Trump calls him a loser, and then he destroys the Veterans Administration. Then he's cleaning up, a lot of homeless on the street, many of whom are, by the way, veterans. And this guy is using the military to be
yep,
able to be this imperial president made possible by SCOTUS that got backdoored well over $1 billion in influence by the likes of Leonard Leo and religious groups, and they're tied to the. I always forget the name of the Catholic sect that's super extreme.
Opus Dei.
Opus Dei. Thank you very much. And yet the Roberts Court, the 6-3 court, because of what was been going on with Mitch McConnell and the Democrats, got their ass kicked as these guys got these corrupt judges in play to basically choke the Constitution and etch a sketch the Civil War by ignoring the 14th Amendment, Section 3 that said nobody that is involved with an insurrection can run for the office of the presidency. And of course, the state of Colorado had every right to bring that to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court goes, you're not going to influence the election, which is corruption. So the second part of our Clean New Deal for Rubik's Cube is the question of judicial immunity. Please continue.
And if the people, if the arbiter of the case can do whatever he or she feels like, boy, we haven't heard about Eileen Cannon in a long time.
True.
All right.
Good point.
Uh, if they can do and rule on a case where they're being fed lies and lies and lies, and somebody over here and somebody over here's giving them the white envelope, that's a bribe, folks. That's a bribe.
Don't
The
forget what the Supreme Court said. The Supreme Court says you have to prove that you've got the intent, the evidence, this, that, and the other, which means you got to do the investigation if you're going to prove quid pro quo. But of course, if nobody's investigating, you're never going to prove it.
you
So,
got it right. You can't stop discovery.
yeah,
If you don't have discovery where you take all the pieces and this side's got to show that side and that side's got to show the other side. If you don't have discovery which for them is like, eh, meh.
We
They're
got,
all,
we got, I think we got the metaphor of the railroad. We got railroaded from the robber barons in a rigged court because if that's where we're back to, right? I mean, they're just simply the oligarchy, the robber barons, and once again, corruption. So you've got the guns that can shoot to kill that can't be held accountable, that are following orders from a corrupt Justice Department, that are not serving the Constitution of the United States, of which, of course, they pledged allegiance to, and their
yeah,
entire
right.
careers were created to serve the Constitution, of which they've betrayed, and then they create an imperial presidency, which is the third part of the Rubik's cube. What is the imperial presidency?
They're they're allowing the president, and Biden could have taken advantage of that, which he did not.
Good point. He could,
Okay.
in fact, yeah. I'd like to call Biden, a modern version of Neville Chamberlain. In so many, he could have used that opportunity and crush probably Elon Musk and all things MAGA. Please continue.
Uh,
We're talking about.
we're talking about the
I asked you
presidential.
what is I asked you what is the unitary executive? What does that mean? The imperial presidency. What does that mean?
That's like a king, a monarch,
Which means what?
tyranny, tyranny.
Okay, which means what? It means that
Ever
he's above
he
the
wants
law.
to do, he can do.
He's above the law. That means we're not the United States. So, what did June Carbone say last week?
I don't remember.
The
You have to
law is
tell me.
dead.
Oh, we I put that in a lot of memes, so it just
Yeah.
is running around.
But I mean, we
But
have a
listen,
Yale grad who's one of the top attorneys in the world who doesn't, she is a master of language. When she says the law is dead, the law is dead
it
because of
is.
what we're talking
But
about.
listen, when you say kings and monarchy, all right, people in the United States admire and glorify and, oh, the prince, the princess, the royal
The
wedding.
fairy tale of
Okay,
the royal family of England. Yeah.
right? So, but even all these people, all these European quote unquote royalty, people in the United States admire royalty. They treat them like
Yeah,
celebrities.
some do. Some do. I don't. I never have. I was with
Well,
Sid Vicious, and
but the
tried to sit
thing
in the
is,
queen. She ain't no human being. Go ahead.
we say we look at the monarchy and we look at the complete control, just like the president, just like, they had courts, they had law enforcement, but if you were an aristocrat, if you were royalty, you always got away with stuff.
Well, they created, of course, in 1412, I believe, was the Magna Carta, and that was a supposition to what would become, the
That was a
Constitution. But that
couple
was to
hundred
save
years.
the oligarchs because they were like, no, you can't just kill us. You need us, and so they pulled their own sort of, But that was the first step. Well, it wasn't the first step towards democracy. Obviously, we had democracy in ancient Greece, right? But the demos of the many, right? But
But
so
somebody,
so let me ask you this, Roseanne. If you've got perversion in the police, you've got perversion in the courts, you've got perversion as a unitary imperial presidency, which is all a perversion of what we think of as a democracy, which was all manifested, before I think Trump stole the election. I'm pretty absolutely positive about that. And obviously Winston Chamberlain, Neville Chamberlain / Biden, who shook hands in the Oval Office with the freaking you know, the insurrectionists in the Oval Office. I mean, that secured the deal. And then, of course, you have, you know, the vice president elect, you know, Harris not pushing back on any of this. Okay. So it's just like this wipeout. And then if everything is perverted with the system of power in a very simplistic way of the way we just described it, what about our democracy in terms of voting? What then would be the ultimate
Look,
perversion of the what?
it
The
doesn't
Electoral
make any
College?
difference. It doesn't make any difference what we say and how we vote because we got this electoral college. So you can have, see, and again, I gotta always go up to the money, to the resources. So you got all this money in a tiny state with seven electors. And
Like
you got,
Wyoming.
okay, Wyoming. And you got all these people in California. They got it. The
50 million people in California and less than a million in Wyoming.
okay. They got, so is that equal?
No, because Wyoming has probably more legislative influence because there's a huge cabal of billionaires because of tax purposes, and you know, we just make the point, but also just so you know, and I think a lot of people out there are aware that you know, the Electoral College was used in the 2020 campaign to steal the election for Donald Trump. We had an electoral falsification slate where they used false forgeries that, of course, lied and I switched the blame. Emperor fucking Trump, the emperor's new clothes on really bad acid, new clothes on really bad acid is now saying, yo, Obama and everybody else used forgeries to frame him. Once again, projection, that's the admittance, yada, yada, yada. But I don't know why. I bet you maybe 1 out of 100 people knows that because we never got there in because it was all happening in Fani Willis's um, uh, prosecution of Rico in Atlanta, excuse me, in Georgia, Fulton County, you know, to find all of those, the 11,966 votes that he
Yeah.
needed to win the state, you know, and it was one of the swing states, obviously, Georgia, which was also a mess and a lot of voter suppression for minorities, we found out. And then ultimately, she couldn't get the case over the finish line because she made a stupid mistake. But the long and the short of it is that was tied to the electoral falsification scheme, which was racketeering, which was RICO, which included all sorts of predicate acts. That was a consortium of a conspiracy of attorneys, quite frankly, that were basically falsifying the Electoral College to steal the election. And as Rachel Maddow pointed out in Project Ultra, that wasn't the first time that happened. That happened back during the time we're trying to get McCarthy elected president back in, I guess, what, the 50s, right? So holy shit. And who knew all that stuff? Steve Bannon. So let me ask you this, and I'm gonna riff on our precepts of the Clean New Deal, but I'm gonna ask you questions to set this whole thing up. I want to ask you first and foremost, my friend. You mentioned money, huge money. You mentioned money in a way that is used to be able to pervert the whole of the body politic, which was once dependent upon the integrity of the law and courage and character of those who would follow the law. So, what then is corruption in your mind? Just quickly, what just define corruption for me?
You can not think about what's right or wrong and very easily have someone pay you off and you do what they ask you to do and you don't ask any questions and you just do it.
Doesn't that have a whole lot of biblical connotations about men's souls being corrupted throughout history in every single religion? I mean,
Of,
do we not know that mankind is corrupted? Isn't
of
pretty much
course,
the original sin, quite frankly?
we're imperfect beings, okay?
We,
And
we
so,
take we take the money bags. We take the quid pro quo. We do what's easy, right? Do we not? Most people do that. By the way, that's called complicity, is it not?
yeah,
Okay, so duplicity. How do you define duplicity? Out of curiosity.
I would say that you have politicians saying one thing and doing another.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly. It doesn't matter if it's a politician. It could be anybody.
It could be anybody.
Say
Yeah.
one thing, you do another. That makes you a hypocrite. So it's complicity, duplicity, and hypocrisy on one column of the soul that creates corruption. The other side of the soul is integrity, decency, dignity, and character, which is what the system depends on. That's why we have faith in the system, right? That's why we follow the laws. That's why we spend the dollars and yada, yada, yada. But the money is really what controls everything. What is our God in the United States?
Money.
It's money. The God is money because you can do whatever you want and you can get away with whatever you want. The more you have, the more people will do for you. And it's a trend. It's a whole Caligula through Epstein sort of dynamic that's been around from for thousands of years, literally. But in the case of the first precept of the Clean New Deal, Roseanne is exactly right about corruption and money being God. And so you have to understand that we have put at the very beginning of turning the tables on this outrageous corruption and betrayal that is destroying our country right before your eyes, which has taken us from the shiny city on the hill, even though we could debate that, that we never really were. But compared to now, I mean, oh my God, this is just like talking about the swamp rats in the worst of the sewage.
Pause.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there was a lot of cities in America. New Orleans comes to mind, and obviously New York and the 20s and 30s with Tammany Hall come to mind. And if you ever saw Martin Scorsese's great work of the gangs of New York, really put that into perspective. You're from Chicago. Oh my God, the corruption in Chicago has been around forever. So this is nothing new, but it's always been a battle, right? It's been a battle between organized crime and corruption. And, this idea of in order to form a perfect union based on life, liberty, and justice for all, predicated on the integrity of law. Okay, so it's a system of laws, but if the laws can be undermined by money, which is corruption, then the whole thing falls. So if you don't understand that, and everybody knows it's about the money, even teenagers know it's all about the money right now, even though they know nothing else. And I wouldn't want to be a teenager coming into this world right now, quite frankly. It's insane what's on the horizon. But what we've identified because of our work in the con that you can find at thecon.tv, and you can reread and understand and like, subscribe, share, become a part, become one of us to unite, because it's going to take millions of us to do this. The very first precept we have is to create a new Glass-Steagall Act with this caveat. Now, some of you, the more educated of you, know what Glass-Steagall is. Glass-Steagall was a law that followed in the Great Depression that basically figured out what created the Great Depression. And because we understood that we had to have finance in a capitalistic economy, that we had to be able to unwind all of the corruption that took place to create the Great Depression, which was pretty much the same stuff that we're in the midst of now. Obviously, it's just more because of technology, and there's just more money at play, and there's more people in on it. But it was pretty much the same shit that was going on in the Great Depression. And a guy by the name of Ferdinand Pecora, who we discovered and who comes from the same island as, my
part of Sicily, same
right?
county.
Roseanne Rabiella Miele's family lived in the same place, which we love the idea of that, because this guy who came, on the boat and pulled himself up by the bootstraps with his family in early 1900s New York, basically got a law degree, got himself into a position because he understood Tammany Hall, by the way. He understood corruption and he understood the mob. He was a Sicilian. And so he knew when they were pissing on his head, telling him it was rain. So he got into a position to do an investigation. One thing leads to another. Senator Glass and Senator Steagall, who both came out of, by the way, the Federal Reserve, and they were thinking through the whole problem. And they were like, well, we got to align interests, which means you can't gamble with other people's money, because that's what created the Great Depression. So they created the Glass-Steagall Act to separate commercial banking, because we don't want to put our money in our mattress. We want to have a fluid economy to where money comes into the system so you can build businesses, buy homes, erect, what needs to be done, finance railroads, blah, 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 right? That's just the nature of our economy, and the engine is the fuel of money. But you've got to separate commercial banking from investment banking. Because in capitalism, the idea is risk reward. And the smartest amongst us who understand how things work to build paradigms can find the money to invest in things that see a need, fill a need, and can revolutionize the economy. And if they press forward and they make the right bets and they win big. That's the idea. And in capitalism, if you fail because you're a liar, a cheater, you break the law, you do X, Y, and Z, you're supposed to go away. You're supposed to freaking maybe go bankrupt, you disappear for 7 years, or you never have a chance to be on a board of directors again, or whatever the fallout is based on the law. But what we figured out during this time period of the Great Depression was that you have to have aligned interests. You have to separate commercial banking from investment banking. And so they, created the Glass-Steagall Law and the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Securities and Exchange Act so that we could have cops on the beat to regulate financial markets. Because you can't create all sorts of sham Ponzi schemes to be able to lie to investors, particularly if they're pensioners with AAA ratings, because there's laws and regulations for that to protect investors, or at least there was until there wasn't, because we had what we call the three Ds in the late 80s, 90s, and Clinton and so on and so forth that created deregulation, desupervision, and decriminalization, which means what, Roseanne? What do the three Ds mean to you?
They mean the law don't mean diddly. Okay. There are, if you got the money, you don't have to do the time.
It means racketeering for smart people
Okay.
that can piss on your head telling you it's rain because they know how the system works. The lawyers, the accountants, the financiers, the guys in the system that know shit that all of the people that work at Walmart or in the fields and everything else, they don't have a clue about. So they can destroy you and they can take your money and steal from you if you're not protected. That's what the robber barons did. That's what the Confederacy did. That's what the plantation model was. And by the way, all the derivatives and all of those things that came, that we all think of a financial innovation that came place in the 90s and so on and so forth, that all happened during the slave trade, by the way. And I'm sure it emanated from Europe, quite frankly, and imperialism. And I think they had all this stuff. I mean, Lloyd's of London's been around for a long time, but before that, you had the East India Trading Company. But to finish up on the precept of the Clean New Deal, and this is where it really needs to land in a big way in your mind, America. You need to understand that we have fiat currency. We have the global reserve currency. The dollar is, which means that banks, quite frankly, can loan into thin air. They can. That's part of a controversial sort of situation, but it's been played out that banks they can make their own loans into thin air. Okay,
It's
go ahead.
because the world accepts dollars.
That's fiat.
Okay. If you have acceptance of your currency, you are the issuer, United States. You issue that currency, and anybody in the world is going to take those dollars. That's the full, they will take the
Well, in
dollar.
the United States, they do because that's by decree. And so everybody's got to, and it's getting weird because of the crypto bullshit, but we can come back to that in a minute. But to your point,
You
the reason
still
why
gotta buy, you
the
still
reason why the
gotta buy.
countries around the world buy treasuries and bonds is because they're guaranteed, by the way. They're a safe bet compared to all the other stuff that goes out there. And the reason we got to a point where we had AAA and people trusted us was because of what we did after the Great Depression, because we had 70 years of relative stability, because we didn't lie, steal, and cheat for a long period of time, at least not to the level that we're going into. So the final piece of the equation on precept number one of the Clean New Deal is to create a new Glass-Steagall with the caveat that you can't use the exigent lending under any emergency. So, for example, we have World War III, we can print dollars, we can make shit happen because people are going to be able to, accept dollars, yada, yada, yada. Disaster, there's a huge hurricane that's coming to hit the East Coast. You've got, all sorts of emergency, reactions that can happen.
They did it during COVID.
Yeah.
Okay. And it went to the criminals.
Well, okay, yeah, okay, but the long and the short of it is that the United States does not run out of money. And
That's right.
The United States isn't going to go bankrupt like Elon Musk, the richest guy in the world, says because it's printing more dollars. That's not how it works. Okay. You can create productive capacity where more and more people are paying taxes, and that's a whole other aspect of it. But the long and the short of it is that we have to have in precept number one the caveat that you can't use the exigent lending capacity of the full faith and credit of the United States to guarantee racketeering.
Right. Of
Now, would
course.
that be stupid for anybody to accept that we can spend trillions of dollars to criminals? How does that make you feel, Roseanne, when you go out on the streets knowing that people are starving, living on the streets, and you're trying to give them sustenance to save their lives and the truth? How does that make you feel that the big boys can get tens of trillions of dollars for roofing and raping, freaking off, as I like to call it, on really the rest of the country?
I'm feeding and I'm looking at glitzy hotels.
Because you're in Las
Every
Vegas.
every place I go, okay? And I want to tear them down. I want to implode them. I want to stop the corruption because I wouldn't be serving all these folks if the criminals weren't making the conscious decision to allow the public to suffer while they give Elon Musk money, while they give Russia money, while they give this one, that one, and the other one money. They make a conscious choice to allow people to suffer, and they don't care. They don't consider themselves criminals. They can do whatever they want.
All right, but let me put it into another perspective. Okay, so I've been to Vegas millions of times over the course of my life. You know what never happens to me in Vegas if I go bust?
Nobody says, "Oh, come on, here, I'll make up for all your losses. I'll give you more
Do I
money.
go to the window and I say, "Hey, man, I just lost $10,000 on roulette.
Here's another 10." No, it doesn't.
I got drunk. I got stupid. I messed up the
No,
whole board." It kind of defeats the whole purpose, does it not?
yeah.
Okay, so here's a kind of a funny interlude to that. What they call that on Wall Street, if something like that happens and you go bust because of stupid freaking decisions and the government comes in to bail you out, they call that moral hazard. What do you think they'd say to me at the machines, or the what do we call them, the what the I can see it, they're behind.
Slot machines
No, I'm talking about where you go get your money, where you go exchange your money from the chips and everything else.
at the cage,
At
the
the
cage.
cage, right. So could you imagine the cage going literally, "Hey, come on, man. Listen, I know I made a mistake. It's, come on, water under the bridge. I got a couple of hookers up in the penthouse. I got to come through and spot me, I don't know, a couple $100,000. What do you think? What would they do?
Close the window, say, "What are you, nuts? Call security to take you
Do
out."
you think they might laugh in my face ahead of
Yeah,
time?
yeah,
Do you think that might have me tossed out? Maybe. I mean,
yeah.
can you think of anything more ridiculous in
No,
Vegas than what I just described?
no.
Okay, so America, what we did is that exactly, but with tens of trillions of dollars. $71 trillion dollars by 2019. That was before COVID. That was before the run on the crypto and mismanagement of the interest rate swaps based on all the stuff that was happening at New Republic Bank and Silicon Valley Bank, which was the home of whom? Peter Thiel, all the billionaires in Silicon Valley. We've done this now for 13 years,
Yeah. Three
nonstop. No,
administrations.
nobody's stopping it.
Right.
Nobody's stopping it. And you look around. People, look around. What are we trying to tell you? What have we seen with Epstein? What have we seen with Trump? What have we seen with Putin? What are we seeing with? You're okay with this now? Do you not know? For those of you, for example, and I was on fire with this today on Blue Sky. If you consider yourself I don't know, climate activist, and you're like, okay, we're going backwards because of the fossil fuel paradigm and Trump and all of this insanity that he's doing. He's going to increase coal production, he's going to increase natural gas production, but mostly it's all about the oil in the Middle East. And of course, all of our friends in Saudi Arabia and UAE and yada yada yada, they're going directly into his pocket. Not to mention the UAE 747 that the American taxpayer is spending 1.5 billion to be able to regenerate to give to his presidential library. The long and the short of it is, we've been giving these guys tens of trillions
Yeah.
of dollars illegally. Illegally. Let me say that again. Illegally. Because in the statutes in Federal Reserve Act 13.3, it says that you can't use the full faith and credit of the United States in commodities trading, speculation, particularly in real estate. Okay, do you not know what happened in 2008? And it's funny, a lot of people are like, oh, yeah, we know everything that happened in 2008. You see all these
Right.
podcasters, and they're like, oh, yeah, everybody knows it. You don't know shit. You know less than what we're starting to find out about Epstein in terms of, wait, why did Leon Black throw billions of dollars into this situation? Why did Les Wexner do all of the stuff that he's doing? X, Y, and Z, and yada, yada, yada. Look, people, you have to understand that we can reboot our energy infrastructure. We can do whatever it takes if we have millions of people that understand what's going on and what's been going on to the detriment of everyone else. Imagine all of the people in the streets at No Kings rallies with the information of, wait a second, we gave tens of trillions of dollars illegally to these guys that are these billionaires that we're all complaining about. Oh, that makes sense. I mean, think about all of the different vectors out there, like Robert Reich, like Bernie Sanders, like Elizabeth Warren, and so on and so forth down the line. People that people respect and they dignify. And have any of those guys said that we've given tens of trillions of dollars?
Jared Brown.
Have we given any of these guys? Have any of those guys said we gave tens of trillions of dollars to the guys that blew up the world illegally? That you remember? Of course not. That's what Obama did. That's what Eric Holder did. That's what they did to save the system because in their minds, I can only assume that they were looking over the abyss, thinking we're about to go to DEFCON 5 and that World War III would happen and that millions of people have died and they didn't want to happen on their watch. So they decided, hey, let's fix the system and not tell anybody. But what they did was they gave trillions of dollars to the guys that have ended up giving us what we're in the midst of. That's going to lead to all of that stuff anyway. So that's number one of the precept of the Clean New Deal. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that enrages you. Hopefully that takes you to the next level. Second, we hear it all the time from Bernie Sanders, right? What do we hear from Bernie Sanders? Roseanne,
Oh,
what do we hear?
about the billionaires. But look,
No, no, no. We hear
two,
about what is the
two
number?
is Citizens United. Every Get rid of Citizens United because the money that the big boys are getting illegally goes where? It goes into the coffers of the DNC and the RNC. And I don't know, I don't see any conventions for nonpartisans.
Right,
They don't.
we're seeing Ro Khanna, we're seeing a handful of guys. We're seeing I don't know Gavin Newsom. Get a lot of attention because Gavin Newsom's like into the whole trolling of Trump and yada yada yada. But who is Gavin Newsom? How did he come into politics? He was working for the Gettys. The Gettys are the billionaires from San Francisco that are oil magnates and
They got a couple of bucks, yeah.
okay, is he gonna put a kibosh on giving billionaires trillions of dollars for free? Hmm. I wonder. Be nice to see what you have to say about that, Gavin. More than happy to talk to you about that anytime you'd like to. Like what you're doing to Trump, yeah, but there's this other thing called kleptocracy and the oligarchy and yada yada yada, built to create the cacotocracy ruled by the stupid. But to your point, and you got that right. Look, Bernie Sanders is always talking about we got to end Citizens United. It's legalized corruption. But like Roseanne just said, we've given trillions of dollars to these guys. We saw in the last election cycle, and the Democrats like to talk about it all the time. Elon Musk spent the most money of any single person in the history of the world to buy the presidency, and he spent what, 277 million. I'm sure he spent so much more than that. By the way, Elon's bottom line doubled, I think, immediately after the election, and of course,
Yeah.
that is situation. I think he went from 250 billion to 400 billion. Most of that, by the way, during COVID and everything else, was increased his stock portfolio because of exactly what we're talking about. It wasn't because they sold more Teslas, by the way. But going back to Citizens United, what the Democrats don't say, and obviously, Trump made mention of this, and it's interesting how he said it, but then he kind of ignored it, and maybe he's just caught up with so much other bullshit that he can't keep track of it all. But he started to talk about how Beyonce got paid X amount and Oprah got paid X amount. Yeah, they did. It, Harris spent 1.5 billion. They got 1.5 billion to lose. And then they didn't challenge it. Why? Well, because the donors got both sides of it locked down and they don't care who wins. And hey, as long as we got it locked and loaded. Okay. So that's the second precept. So now, given the fact that we've talked about a new Glass Steagall, getting rid of Citizens United, what then is the third precept considering what I just mentioned by way of how much money we've plowed into the system?
Look, we could take, and there's everything that we're telling people, you can take and you can look. There's a bazillion different, better, more beneficial ways to spend $71 trillion to improve the planet and the people. We could rebuild the whole grid. Gee, wouldn't it be nice if everybody in the whole world drank clean water? Wouldn't it be nice if we got off of fossil fuel and used renewable energy? Wouldn't it be nice if people had jobs in the area where they live so they wouldn't have to spend thousands of dollars to move to another state? There are pieces in the Green New Deal that are very good. But the bottom line is we can spend $71 trillion to improve people's lives instead of killing them. And that's all we're doing. You know, who cares? People, the big boys, they don't care. The planet's burning up. They burn us all up. Who they gonna sell to? What's gonna happen?
At this point, they're so sick. It's the sociopathy and the psychology of this stuff is out of control. But look, getting the money is not the problem. Okay, it's who's in control of the money and to what end. And when you have
But
people
you're in
that
control because you have an endless supply of guaranteed resources. You've got guaranteed money. You're going up to that cage and the cashier's giving you the money. That's the Fed. The Fed's the cage. Okay? And they're walking up
think
and
about
they're
this.
getting the money.
Think about this as an analogy, right? Okay, so imagine the Fed being the cage, but instead of you being one dimensionally wanting to like be involved with a casino and just bet and that's your life, what if you took that money and you decide I'm going to go plant a garden? I'm going to go find a renewable energy resource so that that casino could actually, be a lot more efficient. I'm going to go find ways to get people to work in very productive ways so that people can thrive and that, we don't can use, I don't know, money to suffocate people on a gerbil wheel of corruption while financing what war nonstop. And we could get into all of the wars around Ukraine and Gaza and things that are happening today, and that's all a part of this, by the way. But literally, people, what don't you get? The fact is that we've had this climate crisis for a long time. What the
Yep.
Trump presidency is all about is literally destroying the progress of renewable energy for the past 30 years. I've heard rumors, and I just started reading things that in China they've created electric cars that you can charge in 2 minutes. That would be intriguing. I mean, what, right? That's faster than you could fill up your car. If that technology is available and it takes all night to charge hybrid cars in the United States,
Yep.
what's wrong with this picture, right? And it's a commitment by the government because the companies are going to do where the incentives are and where they're going to make the most money. And Trump, because he's got his lines palmed by the same guys who got away with 9/11 and all of the other things. And you can fill in the blanks all you want from that point forward. We had 20 years of war on terror to really maximize the geopolitical constraints of the dollar reserve currency. That's what it's been about the whole time. And I could go into that for hours and hours, but we're going to depart that because when you purge the misery of tyranny, you can create the renaissance of possibility. So now that we've described the core fundamentals of the money and the law, right, in terms of the corruption and what you can do with the economy, what about the law? What about the next four precepts of the Clean New Deal?
The next four precepts have to do with getting rid of qualified immunity, getting rid of the presidential immunity, getting rid of judicial immunity, increasing the size of the Supreme Court, having real ethics that if they happen to be like some of the judges that we have now, they actually get punished. Okay. So those are three. That's four, five, six. Um, we have getting rid of the Electoral College because it ain't fair and you cannot have.
It's a
See,
perversion. It's a perversion of democracy. You're not a democracy. It's
you
supposedly constitutional republic, and the way it's worked in the history of the United States is you get two-thirds of, the electors, and then the actual powers that be within each state vote with the people, supposedly, presumably. But it was all aligned so that the minority could basically go against the grain of the majority at any time they thought it was, the right thing to do. Now, let's think about, for example, if that worked in reverse, if we're going into a Nazified country, could Democratic, electors turn the tables on that potentially? Maybe, but I doubt it. I don't know. All I think is that at this stage of the game, man, just getting rid of the perversion of power is what we have to do, and everybody's got to live by that. And we have to have transparent information. And of course, just as a sidebar, we've seen all of the studios, all of media, all of the big law firms all capitulate to fascism or authoritarianism,
you
and
gotta
they can't
have
be trusted.
the
They
you
can't.
gotta have the law work.
They
Okay.
can't. Well, that's the only way society can function.
Oh,
Otherwise, it's a free for all, and then it's going to be
that's right.
it's going to be the power, the survival of the fittest. But in this case, when you have the most money, you have the most power. That's just the way it is. You can go hire all the freaking assassins out there to kill everybody else on your behalf without the law, for example, and that's one piece of it. But just to recap what you just said, you got to get rid of the Electoral College. You got to get rid of qualified immunity. You got to get rid of judicial immunity. Then you got to get rid of the presidential immunity. All of these are absurd. They're just
They are.
absurd on its face. And the fact is, nobody can argue with that when they fully understand it, but they can't piece it all together in their minds
But
because
it's just not the law. It's making exceptions. It's making
loopholes.
police and the judges and the president above the law. That's exactly what it does.
And if they're working for guys, for example, that were cool with raping young girls, they're cool with pedophilia. So is that law and order? Come on, people. most of MAGA and the churches and all of the folks that have been raped themselves or molested, apparently there's millions. I would imagine there's tens of millions of Americans that have been molested. And I don't know what to do about that sickness. It's a mass psychosis. All I can say is that if you have the law that works, if a priest rapes children, he should go to jail. And the way it
That's right.
legally works,
Not go to another church.
right. Or if he goes to jail, usually we always hear that things don't work out very well for pedophilias in prison, right? I mean, that's kind of the perception. But what do they do with Ghislaine Maxwell? Oh, they sent her to a minimum security, prison in Bryan, Texas, where she's going to do what? She's going to be yoga, and she's got some information, blah blah blah. So anyway, that's that's basically that takes us up to the eighth precepts. But I got to get going here, so I'm going to finish it. I'm going to close this up. So we all know the Supreme Court is completely corrupt. So really, in the short term, the only thing we can do is to get 13 justices on the court to weigh out the Roberts Court, and we got to have a massive, massive, massive people's, tidal wave, and a populist tidal wave with the truth that we're talking about, to lift up and do exactly what Mitch McConnell did in reverse with people that become the next Mitch McConnell for the people and liberty and justice for all, and we get Supreme Court justices that are going to be like, nope, no way, no how is this. We're not going back 50 years. We're not going back to slavery. We're not going back to, the Confederacy and the yada, 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 robber barons, and the rich are going to be above the law. No, 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 no. That's just decimated. And many people out there, I'm sure you're probably saying to yourself, okay, to do this, we're going to have a revolution. Okay, well, I don't really have a lot of faith in the American people at this stage. I think a revolution might have to come probably decades, centuries from now, to be honest with you, after everybody really is under the grip of tyranny for a very long time and they can't live with it anymore. I
They
think
gotta suffer,
that
okay?
suffering is really what moves the needle, unless millions of us know what history has done this whole time and realize that we had, hundreds of years and sacrifices from everybody from, the suffragettes, the obviously civil rights, environmental rights, marriage rights, equality rights, yada, yada, yada. Everybody sacrificed to get to a page. But yet, where is everybody? They're in their silos, listening to other people that they're going to complain about Trump. They're not going to give you the paradigmatic reason why Trump is where he is, nor are they going to give you the paradigmatic reason out of this. That's what we're doing. That's what the Clean New Deal is. That's why we've been talking for a lot longer tonight than I anticipated. But here we are. And the final piece of it is you can't allow Congress to front run on stocks. That's just straight up corruption. If you understand Congress, Congress has the power of the purse. They can vote to do what? Increase budgeting for ICE so they can actually participate in stock options of ICE to get rich off of
Yep,
stuff that they're going to build for
yep.
prisons. Are you kidding me? That's just absolutely insane. So we've got to end that. And then term limits, I think, are the last piece of the puzzle. So, my friend, to you, thank you for the dialogue tonight. It's been a really interesting dialogue, all things considered. Take us home.
I'm gonna say, I want you to think about this. You don't have the power unless you got the money. When you put it together, you have corruption. Or if you are like Charles P. Rabiola, who, without a lot of lectures, without a lot of anything, instilled in this little head, you know what? This is good and this is bad. And when you do good, you help people. And when you do bad, you're harming, you're hurting, maybe you're killing. And how does that make you feel? What do you want to feel? Do you want to feel good about yourself or do you want to feel bad?
Or how about this? What's your God tell you to do? Every religion I've ever seen was to do good, So if you actually believe in an afterlife and everything else, then that's kind of a self, effacing question because it's just stupid. We all know the answers. It's cowardice and it's ignorance and it's complicity that enables humanity to allow evil to thrive. The easiest way to get uh, how does it go? The easiest way for evil to expand is when people of good men
Say nothing. Right.
and that's the story of history. And you know what you know. And so, look, my friends, everything is just absurd. It's so easily nakedly corrupt to identify what's going on. And if you sit on the sidelines and you pretend like somebody's going to come save you, they're not. We've got the information. It took us millions of dollars to get this information. It took tens of thousands of hours of sacrifice beyond your wildest comprehension. We're not talking out of our ass. This has been a lifelong adventure for Roseanne. It's been a huge adventure for me over the course of the last 13 years. I used to believe completely in the integrity of law. It was really the most you got to think of I can't even think of like if you put like a tin can or some sort of solid material in the depths of the ocean, you'll see it crush because of the pressure, right? That's what this realization did to my mind, because it's like, my God, there is no way in hell the United States would have so many people of just no character, no conscience, no courage. I don't even know who this country is. And that's what we've got in the millions. And we know that there's millions of people out there that came out to the streets and no kings and the rallies, but there is no focus. The Democratic Party is not going to turn the tables. The Democratic Party overall has not said we're going to jail Trump. The guy's got a RICO presidency and tyranny. Not one Democrat has said my main priority is to make sure that Trump goes to prison and every single person who helped him do what he did. Not one. What do you think would happen if they did? I think that a lot of people would support them personally. Beyond that, you've got everybody bought off by the money. So the kleptocrats own both sides. And the bottom line is there you've got to think of yourself is on the flight 93, not flight 93 so much because that's a different metaphor, but heading into the World Trade Centers. You're sitting on your hands watching the building come into view. What do? That's where we are. This whole society is about to crash and burn in the most horrific way any of us have ever seen in our lifetimes if we don't get a hold of our conscience and our, courage and our character to control this, because it's just simply corruption. We've had laws on the books forever until the corrupt within these tall building law firms, because they make so much ungodly money that they're willing to sell their children into slavery
Yeah.
to maintain the status quo.
Sick.
It's not the first time in history that this has happened.
No.
So it probably won't be the last, but the long and the short of it is, if we don't get a hold of this now, I can assure you, you will feel the pain.
Yeah.
It's not going to go to somebody else. It's going to get everybody, and it already has. That's what's happened with Doge. That's what's happening with, the military in the streets. I mean, come on, people. It's ridiculous. So please follow, like, subscribe, share the Clean New Deal at thecleannewdeal.org. Roseanne Rabiola, myself, Patrick Lovell, the con.tv, and the new Untouchables. Is there anything else you want to add?
It's not real difficult. It's not rocket science. It's racketeering. And
It's
if you
criminal.
don't
It's just
know
criminal.
what racketeering is, they're stealing from you, people.
Yeah. And are
That's
you going
it.
to let the stupid idiots from MAGA control you? Are you going to let them have the dumbest idiots in the history of the world steal billions, destroy our society while you sit on the sidelines and watch?
Nope.
Okay, I'm not. All right, my friends, onwards and upwards. Take care.